The Ice of Prophecy, the impossible winter of 1980. The air in Lake Placid didn't just bite, it screamed. It was February 1980, and the world was a powder keg. The Cold War wasn't just a political term, it was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket of nuclear anxiety and Iranian hostage crises. America was tired. America was losing its grip. And on a small, frozen sheet of ice in upstate New York, 20 college kids were about to do the one thing the Pentagon, the State Department, and the President couldn't. They were going to make the Soviet Union blink. This isn't just a story about hockey. This is a story about a man named Herb Brooks, a coach who looked like a high school chemistry teacher, but possessed the soul of a Machiavellian chess master. It's a story about a Soviet red machine that hadn't lost an Olympic game in 12 years, a team so disciplined they moved like a single lethal organism. The architect of chaos. Herb Brooks didn't want the best players in America, he wanted the right ones. He cut the superstars, he ignored the NHL scouts. Instead, he gathered a group of scrappy kids from Minnesota and Boston, rivals who hated each other more than they feared the Russians. During the grueling months of 1979, Brooks put them through Herbies, suicide sprints that left players vomiting on the ice. When they complained, he gave them more. He wasn't building a team, he was forging a weapon. He knew that to beat the Soviets, you couldn't outskill them, you had to outwork them. You had to be so fit that by the third period, when the red machine expected you to crumble, you were just getting started. The shadow of the Kremlin. On the other side of the world, the Soviet team was the pride of the Politburo, led by the legendary Vladislav Tretiak, widely considered the greatest goaltender to ever live, and the KLM line. They were professionals in every sense but the name. They lived in barracks. They practiced 11 months a year. They had recently crushed a team of NHL All-Stars 6-0. To the Soviets, the 1980 Olympics were a formality. To the Americans, it was a suicide mission. The Friday Night Miracle. February 22, 1980. The fieldhouse was packed with 8,500 screaming fans, but millions more were huddled around radios and televisions. The atmosphere was electric, bordering on feral. The game started as everyone expected. The Soviets scored first. Krutov redirected a shot past American goalie Jim Craig. The crowd went silent. But then something strange happened. The Americans didn't panic. Mark Johnson scored. Then the Soviets scored again. By the start of the third period, the U.S. was trailing 3-2. In the locker room, Brooks didn't give a win one for the Gibber speech. He looked his boys in the eye and said, "You were born to be players, every one of you, and you were meant to be here tonight. This is your time." What followed was 10 minutes of pure, unadulterated sporting madness. Mark Johnson tied it. Then, with 10 minutes left on the clock, Mikey Ruccio, the captain who had been told he wasn't good enough for the pros, found the puck on his stick. He fired. 4-3. The final 10 minutes were the longest in American history. The Soviets unleashed a barrage of shots, a literal storm of black rubber. Jim Craig stood like a wall of reinforced concrete. The clock ticked down. 10, 9, 8. Al Michaels, the broadcaster, delivered the line that would define a generation. "Do you believe in miracles?" "Yes." The aftermath. More than a medal. The miracle wasn't the gold medal game. That came later against Finland. But it was the moment the world shifted. It was the moment a fractured nation found its voice again. People were dancing in the streets from New York to Los Angeles. But the real astonishing part? After the game, the Soviet players didn't look angry. They looked confused. They had been beaten by amateurs. They shook hands with the Americans, a rare moment of humanity in a decade defined by silos and shadows.
The 1980 miracle was the heartbeat, but the Winter Olympics is a sprawling tapestry of blood, ice, and psychological warfare. If Lake Placid was about a nation finding its soul, the years that followed were about individuals pushing the human spirit, and sometimes human sanity, to the absolute breaking point. Part 2. The Ghost of Sarajevo and the Battle of the Bryans. While the American hockey team was busy becoming legends, the world turned its eyes to the 1984 games in Sarajevo. It was a city of beauty before it became a city of siege, and it hosted one of the most elegant yet fiercely competitive chapters in Olympic history. But the real drama for the U.S. audience moved to 1988 in Calgary, This wasn't just about sport. It was about the Battle of the Bryans. Brian Boitano, USA, and Brian Orser, Canada, were the two best figure skaters on the planet. The media turned it into a heavyweight boxing match on thin blades. Boitano was a technician, stoic, powerful, and precise. Orser was the artist, fluid, emotional, and the home crowd favorite. They were so evenly matched that the gold medal came down to a single fractional point in the long program. Boitano delivered a performance of such military precision that it felt like he had been sculpted from the ice itself. When he landed his signature triple Lutz, the physics seemed to defy gravity. He won by a hair, but that night, figure skating changed from a performance art into an elite, high-stakes athletic battlefield. Part 3. The Scandal That Shattered the Ice, 1994. If you ask any American about the 1994 Lillehammer Games, they won't talk about skiing. They will talk about the whack heard round the world. The rivalry between Nancy Kerrigan and Tonya Harding is the closest the Olympics has ever come to a Shakespearean tragedy mixed with a tabloid fever dream. Nancy was the ice princess, elegant, sponsored by Vera Wang, the American sweetheart. Tonya was the wrong side of the track's rebel, powerful, the first American woman to land a triple axel, but perpetually struggling for respect. On January 6, 1994, during a practice session for the U.S. Championships, a man hired by Harding's ex-husband struck Kerrigan in the knee with a telescopic baton. The footage of Kerrigan crying, "Why?" became the most watched sports clip in history. The drama followed them to Norway. The FBI was involved. The USOC tried to kick Harding off the team. The entire world tuned in, not to see who would win, but to see if they would survive each other. The reality? Kerrigan showed incredible grit, returning from a brutal injury to win silver. The twist? Harding's lace broke in the middle of her routine, a poetic metaphor for her crumbling career. She finished 8th. That night, the women's figure skating final became the third highest-rated sports broadcast in American history, trailing only 2 Super Bowls. Part 4. The Flying Tomato and the New Guard. As the 2000s rolled in, the Winter Olympics faced a crisis. It was becoming old. The youth weren't watching cross-country skiing. They wanted adrenaline. Enter Shaun White. In 2006, touring, and 2010, Vancouver, the Flying Tomato turned snowboarding from a counterculture hobby into the Olympics' main event. White didn't just win, he dominated with a rock star persona that the buttoned-up Olympic Committee didn't know how to handle. He was doing double mech twist 1260s while others were still trying to land basic rotations. He brought an X Games grit to the snowy peaks of Italy and Canada, proving that the Winter Games could be cool, loud, and dangerous. Part 5. The Cost of Greatness. Behind the medals lies a darker, more astonishing truth, the physical toll. Consider the 2000 Cannes Vancouver Games, which began in tragedy. Nodar Kumari Talashvi, a luger from Georgia, died during a training run on a track that was deemed too fast. It reminded the world that the Winter Olympics aren't just a game, they are a flirtation with death. Every American downhill skier, from Lindsey Vonn to Bode Miller, carries a body held together by titanium screws and sheer willpower. Vonn, arguably the greatest female skier in history, competed with ACLs that were essentially shredded ribbons, winning gold in 2010 through a haze of pain that would have sidelined a professional football player. The saga continues. This historical journey is vast, from the Eddie the Eagle underdog comedy to the modern dominance of Chloe Kim.
The saga deepens. To understand the Winter Olympics, you have to understand that it isn't just a contest of speed. It is a contest of surviving the elements and surviving the politics. In this next chapter, we move from the ice of Lake Placid to the shadows of the Utah Mountains and the high-octane adrenaline of the modern era. Part 6. The Scandal That Almost Froze the Games. Salt Lake City, 2002. Before a single skier hit the slopes in 2002, the Salt Lake City Games were already the most controversial in history. In 1998, a whistleblower leaked a memo that sent shockwaves through the sporting world. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, was for sale. To secure the bid, Salt Lake organizers had funneled millions in gifts to IOC members, scholarships for their children, lavish shopping sprees, and even medical treatments. It was the biggest bribery scandal in sports history.
10 members were expelled, and the Olympics almost lost its American television sponsors. The man brought in to save the games? A businessman named Mitt Romney. He slashed budgets, turned the event into a security fortress, this was just months after 9/11, and transformed a PR nightmare into a $100 million profit. The 2002 Games became a symbol of American resilience, but the pay-to-play shadow still haunts the Olympic rings today. Part 7. The 2002 Figure Skating Heist. The drama didn't stay in the boardroom, it spilled onto the ice in one of the most astonishing judging scandals ever recorded. The Canadian pair, Jamie Sale and David Pelletier, performed a flawless routine. The Russian pair, Elena Berezhnyia and Anton Sikarelidze, made a visible technical error. Yet when the scores went up, the Russians had the gold. The crowd booed so loudly the building shook. The investigation was swift and shocking. A French judge confessed she had been pressured by her own federation to vote for the Russians in exchange for a favor in the ice dancing category later that week. In a move never seen before or since, the IOC awarded a second set of gold medals to the Canadians. It led to a total overhaul of how skating is judged, moving from the perfect 6.0 system to the complex point system used today. Part 8. The Speed King and the Apollo Effect. While the judges were fighting, a 19-year-old with a soul patch and a bandana was reinventing American speed, Apollo Anton Ono. Short track speed skating is essentially a roller derby on knives. It is chaotic, violent, and unpredictable. In 2002, Ono became the face of the sport. In the 1,500-meter final, a massive pileup at the finish line left Ono with a gash in his leg that required 6 stitches. He crawled across the finish line to take silver. But it was his gold in the 1,500 meters, won after a South Korean skater was disqualified for blocking, that made him a hero in the US and the most hated man in South Korea. Their servers actually crashed from the volume of angry emails sent to the IOC. Ono went on to becoming the most decorated American Winter Olympian of all time, proving that in the Winter Games, it's not about how you start, it's about how you slide. Part 9. The Downhill Daredevils, the Vaughn and Miller Era. If Ono was the king of the short track, Bode Miller was the outlaw of the mountain. Bode didn't care about medals as much as he cared about the line. He skied with a reckless abandon that terrified coaches. In 2006, he famously partied his way through Italy, coming home empty-handed but unrepentant. By 2010, he redeemed himself with 3 medals, showing a rare vulnerability that captivated the American public. Then came Lindsey Vonn. She wasn't an outlaw, she was a machine. Vonn turned alpine skiing into a science. Her 2010 gold in the downhill was won while she was nursing a shin burger, an injury so painful she couldn't even put on her ski boots days before the race. She became the first American woman to win gold in the downhill, cementing her status as the greatest female skier to ever live. The deep freeze facts you didn't know. The bobsled secret. In the early days, bobsledders were often just thrill seekers. At the 1932 Lake Placid Games, the U.S. team included Billy Fisk, who was only 16 years old. He won gold and later became a war hero. The first black gold. It wasn't until 2002 that a black athlete won gold in a Winter Olympic individual event. Vonetta Flowers, USA, transitioned from track and field to bobsled and made history, breaking a barrier that had stood for 78 years. The Miracle Stick. The hockey stick used by Mike Aruzio to score the winning goal against the Soviets in 1980 was sold at auction for over $260,000. The story is far from over. We haven't even touched on the technological doping wars, how suits and waxes are engineered like F1 cars, or the rise of the X Games generation like Chloe Kim.
The saga of the Winter Games isn't just written in the snow, it's etched in the nerves of the athletes who stare down death at 90 miles per hour. As we move into the modern era, the Olympics transformed from a test of amateur grit into a high-stakes collision of cutting-edge science, extreme adrenaline, and cultural revolutions. Part X, the science of the slide, the 90-mile-per-hour chess match. If you want to understand the true, astonishing nature of the Winter Games, you have to look at the bobsled, luge, and skeleton. Americans often call it NASCAR on ice, but that's an understatement. In NASCAR, you have a roll cage. In the skeleton, you are lying face first on a cookie sheet, your chin inches from the jagged ice, hurtling down a frozen tube at speeds that would get you a ticket on a California highway. In the 2010s, the U.S. began a secret project called the Night Train. This wasn't a train, it was a bobsled engineered by NASCAR legend Jeff Bodine. He realized that American bobsledders were using second-hand European sleds, so he used wind tunnel testing and ballistic-grade materials to build the night train. The result? Stephen Holcomb, a man who was legally blind just years prior due to a degenerative eye disease, led the U.S. to its first four-man bobsled gold in 62 years at the Vancouver Games. Holcomb's story is the ultimate against-all-odds tale. He had secret surgery to restore his sight, kept it from his coaches so he wouldn't be cut, and then drove a 1,400-pound bullet to glory. Part 11. The Flying Tomato versus the New School, 2018 Pyeongchang. By 2018, the world had changed. The Generation X rebels were now the veterans. Shaun White arrived in South Korea looking for redemption after a devastating fourth-place finish in Sochi. But there was a new face on the mountain, Chloe Kim. At just 17 years old, the daughter of South Korean immigrants was representing the USA in the land of her ancestors. While other athletes were meditating or listening to heavy metal to get in the zone, Chloe was famously tweeting about being hangry and wanting ice cream in between her qualifying runs. Then she dropped into the halfpipe. She didn't just win, she humiliated the competition. She landed back-to-back 1,080s, a feat no other woman had ever accomplished. She won gold with a score of 98.25 out of 100. For the American audience, Chloe Kim represented the new America, diverse, effortlessly cool, and terrifyingly talented. Meanwhile, Shaun White faced his final boss, Japan's Ayumu Hirano. In his final run, under the highest pressure imaginable, White landed a perfect back-to-back 1,440. When the score came up, he collapsed in tears. It was the miracle on ice moment for the extreme sports generation. Part 12. The Unified Heartbreak and Hope. The 2018 Games also featured one of the most politically astonishing moments in sports history. For the first time, North and South Korea marched under a single unification flag and fielded a joint women's hockey team. The team didn't win a single game. They were outscored 28-2, but every time they took the ice, the stadium erupted. It was a reminder that the Winter Olympics, born in the fires of the Cold War, still possess a unique power to bridge the widest canyons of human hatred, if only for 2 weeks. Part 13. The Hidden Costs. The ice in their veins. Behind the NBC highlights and the cereal boxes lies the gritty reality of the winter grind. The wax techs. Did you know the U.S. ski team employs wax wizards who spend 15 hours a day testing over 500 different types of chemical waxes? If the wax is 0.5% off for the temperature of the snow, a gold medalist becomes a did not finish. The G-force. Bobsledders pull up to 5 Gs in the turns. That's the same force experienced by fighter pilots. Many athletes suffer from sledhead, a form of mild concussion caused by the constant vibration of the ice against the helmet. The shocking USA stats. The Lake Placid curse. Only one city has hosted the Winter Olympics twice, Lake Placid, 1932 and 1980. Both times the world was on the brink of a global crisis, the Great Depression and the Cold War. The medal machine. The U.S. has won over 300 Winter Olympic medals, but nearly half of them have come since the year 2002. We are currently living in the golden age of American winter dominance. The journey isn't over. We are heading into the most recent chapters, the empty stadium games of 2022, the rise of Nathan Chen's mathematical perfection on ice, and the future of the 2026 Milano Cortina Games.